Well, what is up, and welcome to Learn Lettering Live. My name is Gabe, and I'm super glad that you've decided to join me here today. Yeah, this is a live stream that I do once a week where I teach lettering. So, lettering is one of my specialties, something that I really focus in the field of graphic design. And what I've learned about lettering is there's so much to it. There's so much nuance. There's so many tiny things to learn. And so I figured the best format for teaching something like this is in a setting like this. It's almost like a classroom setting where we have extended time to look at different concepts and just kind of learn together as we go. And so that is the kind of the vision of this time and the reason that I do it. So if you're jumping in, I'm just really excited that you're here. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope that you'll learn something new, whether you're a graphic designer or you're just like one of my friends who knows nothing about design. I hope that it's entertaining and that we can create something really cool together. So a little encouragement before we get started today. I just keep thinking with all the YouTube stuff and with this live stream, it's like I'm just trying to have a blast. Like I'm just trying to have a lot of fun. And so far, this has been really a highlight of my week. And it's not a highlight because it's like really successful per se, or there's just all these people who are raving about it. But I feel like I just feel so content in it, in myself, just having a great time, creating really cool stuff. And so I want to encourage you. I'm going to journey on that, but try to get out of that mindset where you're letting other people or anything else be what determines what you feel excited about and what you feel happy about and feel like things are a success, not because people say it is, but because you're enjoying it. So I just would encourage you to gauge success in a different way. And that's kind of my goal and my aim today is to just have fun. So without further ado, let's get into the video and welcome to Learn Lettering Live. All right, so here we are. We're on my iPad. I've kind of said this before, but you can do this by hand 100%. I probably will do some videos by hand, but the whole technical video setup makes it a little bit more tricky. So this is really the easiest way, and there are a lot of great benefits to working digitally. It's just really forgiving, and there's just a lot of cool stuff. It's a great platform to learn on. So that's why I'm going to be working from my iPad today. This is a piece that we had started last week. So this is based on, let me pull this layer up. This is based on this lettering piece that I did like 6 years ago or something, a really long time. And I did this by hand, so it's on a big giant piece of paper. And I'm thinking when I finish this one today, I think I also want to do it again on like a big piece of paper by hand. I think would be really fun. But anyway, so this is a piece that I really love. It's hanging in my office here. And I've thought, I look at it all the time. And so I've thought several times like, wow, like I really like this about it. Like these things still bug me, or I just wonder if I should have made a different decision with these parts of it or whatever. But what I'm doing in this video is I just took the whole thing and I said, let's just start again, like we're starting from the beginning and create it differently. So kind of redoing this thing really just for fun. And so this is what we've come up with. I'll turn my opacity up just a little bit. This was our sketch. And so we talk about this thing. Let me pull up I want to get my highlighter color here. And then I gotta get my right pen as well. Let's see. And where's my notes? Okay, great. So this thing called a typographic stencil. And so essentially what this is a typographic stencil, or the way that I treat this is it's an outline of my letters and where I want them to go. So that's kind of what we've been doing so far is we're stenciling. We're actually sort of past the stenciling point, but basically stenciling is whenever you're really just putting in what your letters are, where your letters are going to be. It's kind of where you work on your spacing. You're kind of aligning everything. You're getting an idea for me, things like these flourishes, like where will they go? How will they interact? So that's where we started on this. Is we started with this typographic stencil, which is really just a way of mapping out what you're going to do. It's kind of like good planning. So if you're going to build a house or something, you need a blueprint. And so this is your blueprint. And so from here, now that we have our typographic stencil and we've decided on basically the general look of our type, like this looks pretty similar to what it will look like in the final version. What we'll do now is we are going to actually create it. So I talked about in the past, something that's helpful to do sometimes is you can just really keep drawing on the same layer, like just erasing and taking away and adding. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do it from scratch. So I'm going to use this as a stencil, like what I've said. But I'm going to draw all the letters again. And this is something that I do sometimes because it really helps you fine tune. The important thing to remember here is, say I'm drawing this S, and this is extremely important when you're working by hand, like on something like a painting or a mural, is whenever you're going, you may be in the middle of the stroke and you're like, I think maybe we should cut in a little bit more this way. I find that ad-libbing like that, whenever you're doing your final version, is usually pretty dangerous. And so for me, for the most part, I figured out those things in the stencil. So now this part, I really can just focus on getting really smooth lines. And I'm also going to be using this brush right here. It's interesting. It's got a little bit of texture, which I like to it. And it's just going to add a little bit of character to our lettering piece. And so, yeah, I'll stop and pause along the way as I have different things. But today we're really just going to be working on cleaning this up, getting all these pieces fully drawn out, and then we'll do some fun things like adding texture and color and a background and really bringing this all together as a piece. So without further ado, I'm gonna get started. So I already began sketching an E, and so that's kind of the idea of what I want my letters to look like. I'll redo that one because I scaled this up so it's not the right resolution right now. But anyway, so that's an idea of what our letters are gonna look like. I'm gonna flesh them all out and we'll all look pretty consistent. All right, here we go. And so what I'm going for as well here too, this is important to me, is I do want some imperfections here. That's one of the beautiful things about hand lettering and what sets it apart from just typing something into your computer and using a font, is that there is a lot of room for happy accidents. There's also sometimes room for not so happy accidents. I've had my fair share where you like leave out a letter to a word and you're halfway through painting. But what is cool is that there's a lot of opportunity to sort of mess up a little bit or to have not perfect shapes. And it's interesting because whenever I first got into graphic design, I had a family friend who gave me whenever you used to buy Creative, or it wasn't even Creative Cloud, it was the Creative Suite. So that was before the subscription from Adobe. I had a family friend, and she basically let me have her second copy. So when you would buy one copy of the Creative Suite, you can have it on 2 machines. And so she knew I was interested in graphic design. I was probably like 15, I think. I really need to reach out to her and just say like, you really changed my life when you gave me the graphic design software. But anyway, so whenever I got the software on my computer and I watched her using it for the first time, what really amazed me about it was that all my life I had been an artist, and I had been drawing and maybe not designing per se, but I always loved art. And it amazed me because when I was drawing, circles are like the worst because you can never really get a perfect circle. And being pretty picky and kind of a perfectionist as I am, I was always kind of a bummer. Like, I'm never gonna get the perfect circle. But in things like Illustrator or these digital mediums, like a circle truly is a circle. It's exact. And the same thing, like a line really is perfectly straight, or however you want it to be. And so to me, that was just what blew my mind. And I was so excited about the precision of the programs and the precision of working digitally as opposed to by hand. But I also found that what's interesting is that whenever you are working digitally for a while, it can start to feel stale. Not that the work itself is bad, but more that I think we're made to crave things that feel authentic. And so right when I was in college was really when, at least in my world, hand lettering really started to blow up. Like, people had a big interest in it, and I really got into it and started posting things on Instagram and just trying my hand, that's kind of a pun, at lettering. And what I also loved about it, and the same, like opposite of what I had loved about Illustrator and things, is that it was imperfect and that there was no perfect line and there was no perfect piece, but every piece bore these beautiful imperfections that you can't get in a computer. And so there'd be times where I could have done something on the computer and it probably would have been faster, but giving it time to create those happy accidents are things that you really can't recreate on the computer. Like you can't replicate that, at least not easily. Some people can, it just takes a lot of skill. But anyway, so that's kind of my rant on why hand lettering is so unique and so exciting. And even still, like I am working digitally for sure, but I'm also not trying to make it perfect. And I'm trying to embrace the imperfections, trying to embrace the things that aren't perfect. And so you see we have a little bit of this texture here, which I'm going to leave because I think that's going to be interesting. And even as I was doing this, you know, I was looking at some inspiration on Instagram as I was getting ready today. And like, there really is nothing like doing it truly by hand. Like if I were doing this with watercolors, like the watercolors themselves, the textures that you get from the watercolors are just so unique and so beautiful. And there are a lot of great programs that can replicate it, but in my opinion, really nothing beats actually doing it by hand. And that's why I'm excited in the future if I actually do this all by hand, this piece is that I will get to embrace and enjoy those imperfections as well. And I really just think it adds to it. Where in the past I thought it would detract, but I've found more and more that it's actually what people really connect with, which is pretty cool. Another small thing, if you haven't, feel free to like and subscribe. I would love to know that you like this video. Like it really just helps me to know that someone's like enjoying it. Though that's not the end of the world for me, but yeah, if you are liking the video, then feel free to like it. And I post content every week. So we have things like this where it's a lettering tutorial, and this is every week on Fridays. But I also post tons of videos when it comes to things like Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, even After Effects when it comes to motion graphics. Kind of my MO as I've learned graphic design is like, let's try our hand at everything, you know? And so I wouldn't say I'd say I'm kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none, or maybe only a few, but I've learned a lot and I would love to just share my knowledge. And so also, if there's anything that you are wanting to learn when it comes to graphic design or logo design or any of that, feel free to drop a comment and tell me, because I'm always looking for new ideas. And chances are, if you give me something interesting to do, I will do it. So, and also what's cool is for me is if I don't know how to do whatever you're talking about, then I get to learn something new. So yeah, if there's something that you're interested in, something you don't know or understand how to do, please let me know and I would love to make a video. So you can see a lot of times I'm just doing these big, long strokes. I find that though it can be good to do tiny strokes together, if you can really steady your hand and get one long stroke, that usually looks a bit better. And then you can always come back and like refine it or erase a little bit if needed. And see that even here, like this is not perfect. Like we've got some imperfections here, but I'm really just gonna leave those things. I may adjust a few of them later, but I wanna embrace these imperfections, really let them shine. All right. Great. So like I said, just big strokes, and then we can always come back and we can refine it as we need to. The benefit of working digitally for sure is that when you're working on paper, like you can only erase so many times, but before it starts to leave a mark. But here, we have as many do-overs as we need, which is again why it's such a great medium to learn on. I've also seen streamers on different things or people on YouTube just like when they do stuff like this, they just kind of ramble about their lives. I don't know what I would even talk about, but if you have anything that you think would be interesting to know, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of focus in. Feel free to watch or ask questions. And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know that we'll finish this today. It just depends on how much energy I have. But okay, so you can see here that our S looks really delicate. And I like this. I'm going to make a few notes here for us though. So our S is really delicate here, like especially this area and this is real thin. And it may be a little too thin for me. I also see that with the comparison of how thick this part is, this part feels a little too thin as well. And so a lot of this is all about balance. If you look closely, you can see that this right side of the letter feels really big and chunky, and then this side feels really thin. And so I want to make sure there's balance here. And so I'm going to come back and I'm going to add in some more thickness, I guess you could say, some more width to this side of my S, because I want to make sure that my letter feels really balanced. And then I'm also going to make my thin parts, my thin lines, a little bit thicker, just because when they're too thin, you can kind of lose. They just feel like a little bit too hard to follow, I guess. I like them to have contrast, but not be too thin. Yeah, so I think that makes me a little happier. So remember we talked about very important typographic concepts, which I'm going to hit here in just a second, called a contour. So I don't know if you remember, I hope that when I say contour, you're like, yes, I know about contour. You've told me way too many times. But let me show you what a contour is. So contour is your negative space of your letter. So for this one, and this is just kind of rough here. That's one part of it. And then we kind of have so these are our contours, and you know, this is this area. It can be like maybe that. So anyway, this is the negative space within our letters. And what's important for typography is that you really want to focus on those contours, and you want to focus on the shapes within them. So for example, if we were to totally remove this S here, and all you see is the shapes in between, what do we see in those curves? You know, like, do those curves look nice? Do they look consistent? And I'm not talking about small errors that come from the brush. I'm talking about, are they smooth? I think that we have done that. The top up here, I think that looks nice, and in the bottom. But my point in all this is that whenever you're working with letter forms, it's really important to focus on the negative space, because your eye is actually going to perceive that negative more than it does the positive. So we think we're looking at an S here, but your eye is taking in all of the space in between the letters. And so your eye is looking and saying, man, like, how does this space look? Is this space looking nice and even? Are there nice lines here? Is there nice shapes? And so for us, whenever we're making letters, or for me or you or whoever's doing it, you want to make sure that you're really focusing in on those interior shapes, because that really is what makes and breaks a piece. And we'll also see that in between all of these, we have more contours, like especially over here, your eye is seeing all these negative spaces. And so that's why it's really, really important for us to focus in on making sure they look great. Delete that now. Okay, here we go. All right, we're gonna continue on here, and I'm basically just gonna match the style of my serifs throughout. So I've kind of made this standard with the S. I have my line here on the top of the W. I'm gonna have a little bit like a chisel piece. That's probably not the way to say that. It's funny because with lettering, I'm I suppose largely self-taught. Though self-taught really means like Instagram taught and watching people do this online. And so I'm sometimes will make up words for things that I'm pretty sure have other names. But that's okay. I almost went and just filled this in, which, you know, I could do, but then I would lose the opportunity to have all my texture. One thing I could do though is I can use my selector and I can automatically just select whatever is inside here. There we go. So now I'm just selecting the inside, so that lets me come a little bit more freely and color it in. And I can achieve some of that texture. Let's try that again. There we go. Now I can achieve that texture without having to worry about going out of the lines. You will see it does leave like a little white edge that I'll have to come back and don't know if anyone here listens to, I don't listen to a lot of pop music or anything, but my wife really loves Olivia Rodrigo, and sometimes her stuff will just get very stuck in my head. So if you hear me humming, that's what it is. But I will say, totally random here, Olivia Rodrigo is pretty sick. Like, she can write music like I've really not heard before. If you haven't listened to her, you should give her a shot. I usually am just the guy that like plays whatever random playlist on Spotify spits out to me, and so I don't really know as much music as I used to. I just kind of can recognize stuff that I get recommended. Olivia, I know. Okay, so I'm about to do my thin, and I'm going to match the same thickness of what's over here for this W. Keep it nice and straight as best as I can. Great. I'm curving this down into the serif of the W so it all feels consistent. Okay, so for my big swoosh here, I don't know, maybe I'll just give it a shot, but most likely what I normally do is I leave those for the end, just so I kind of get in the zone with the letters, and those swooshes are quite complex. Or flourishes, I mean swooshes is not really the most professional way to call it that. You also know that I really zoom in and out a lot, and that's an important thing when it comes to lettering and type design. You know, obviously when you're using like your sketchbook, you can't really do that, but you can kind of pull back a little bit and look. Something that's important is to, when you're up close and personal with this stuff, you can think that it looks right and that it looks good, but it's kind of backing up will help you notice any flaws or things that might need to be corrected. It's also a good rule when it comes to logo design, and that I do a lot. Like if you watch any of my logo videos, I often am zooming in and out really kind of the whole time, and it's kind of erratic. I like zoom out really quick and then zoom back in. But the reason for that is because, especially with logos, if something is going to be seen, you could have it on a billboard, so really big, or a sign, or you could also have it on like a business card or in the corner of a post on social media. So especially when we're using type, making sure that we're legible on all sizes is really important. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking whenever I'm working here, is that I'm constantly zooming in and out and making sure that I'm not getting so fixated on this one tiny piece that I'm forgetting how it all works together, or forgetting different elements, or even too, if I'm just focused right here, I could end up making this piece of the W much thicker or thinner than the other ones, and that's part of the important thing with lettering too, is bringing consistency. Sometimes when I work by hand, I'll even use a ruler and measure out to make sure that they're all the same, which I was talking about the imperfections of working with hand lettering, but my imperfections are few and far between, honestly. Not that I'm perfect, but I appreciate what the subtle imperfections, but I don't want anything to feel wrong. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's trying to find that happy medium between thinking like, oh, that's great because it's hand drawn, you can tell it's hand drawn, that's really cool, and then also like not being like, oh, like that probably shouldn't be that thick or that thin, or like that letter's like weirdly taller than the rest or something like that. And that's why I'm also checking back with the other letters pretty often, make sure that they're all looking consistent, especially because here I'm not measuring anything, I'm just okay, we're going to connect our W and our E here. This happens a lot of times whenever I draw serif letters, because oftentimes the serifs are really coming close to each other, and it makes sense, like it would kind of be awkward to separate them here. Sometimes you can, and I actually think I did do that. Yeah, I did do that with the original piece, but I also like to combine these, because that's another way as well that you can see when something is custom, is as far as lettering goes, and it's not just a font that someone typed in, is whenever you have these neat connections like this, which you can get that in a font, but in general, they're not going to have as subtle or unique connections. Okay, moving on to our third letter. This is exciting. In general, too, my W is a little bit different because it's angled, but now if we're looking at this angle here that I just drew for my E, I'm going to want to make sure that I follow that throughout the rest of my letters. Like, I don't want them to slowly start shifting a bit more, then they should be consistent. And so I'll probably keep this guy as a reference there so that I can go back and use that in the future with the other letters that I draw to make sure they're all consistent. Also, when I'm drawing this thick line, I'm really paying attention, looking up and down the letter to see if at any point I'm starting to get too wide or get too thin. I'm trying to keep it basically the exact same distance away from the other side the whole time as I draw, which is something that really just takes practice and muscle memory to get just right. So if that's hard for you, it is for me too. We're all learning and getting a little better day by day. Okay, I'm just gonna focus here. I'm probably not gonna chat as much, but feel free to watch. Okay, I like this. I like our subtle imperfections. It does look like right here my E is a little bit thinner than those parts of the W, which, well, that was a strange arrow. And it is really subtle, but those are important things to me. So I'm just gonna bring in just slightly a little more thickness to this E. Going slow, holding my hand really still, sometimes kind of not even breathing, just so I can focus all my energy on keeping that steady hand. Okay, looks pretty solid. I'm gonna turn off my stencil and we'll see how this is looking. Okay, I like this. There's a little wonkiness right here on this E. It felt a little uneven. There we go. Yeah, I like it. It's looking good. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I am not going to copy and paste this E because that's kind of, well, there are sometimes, if I'm totally honest, that I do. It's like, yeah, let's just bring this E over here, and then great, we got another E done. I'm not gonna do that, but what I am gonna do is I am just gonna use this to gauge my spacing, and then also to make sure my thickness of my letters is consistent. So it does feel like for it to look correct, I'm squishing it in a little bit more. I don't know if that makes sense, but with the stencil, it should be like out here further, but you can see it like talking about our contours again. Have another lesson in contours, shall we? It feels like the space here is too thick. Like really, it's actually this space. And this space should feel the same. But for some reason, this side feels a little bit too thick to me. And so I need to, at this point in the process, I want to make sure that these things are kind of settled. So the easy trick that I'll do here is I'll just move this first E over just a smidge. Great, so things are starting to look even. And then just because I liked it, I'll still connect my E and my W. Adding in a little more. That's cool. Okay, so now I can bring this E down in opacity. I just want to get an idea of where my thicknesses need to be. Man, this little glove is so helpful. Those lines actually don't look very straight on the screen, but to me they feel quite smooth. And honestly, that's all I need this little stencil for. I just want to get that right. Working digitally. Remember, I want consistency, but not perfection. So I'm just lightly going to be matching that style of the E next to it. I want to make sure the serifs are about the same size and they feel consistent between the two. So I'll do, I zoom in and zoom out. It's a bit thicker right here underneath. I'll come back to that. I'm not sure which I like better yet. There's also a lot of different ways to do the serifs. I could do it kind of like this, which is just crazy dramatic and so kind of like elongated. But then that's very different from what's happening over here. And so there's a lot of subtlety and nuance to making sure that these curves feel consistent. But when they do, then our whole piece really feels like it works together as one. So that's the main thing when you're drawing, especially when you're drawing things like not scripts, but actual like sans serif or serif letter forms, is you really are going for a sense of uniformity while also balancing it with that freedom to make mistakes and have different unique parts about different letters. So in other words, it's the uniformity that helps bring the piece together, and then it gives you room to experiment and go outside the lines with other things. So you kind of, in my opinion, you have to have a balance of things that feel consistent. Well, I mean, again, we talk about this a lot, how there are rules and rules are meant to be broken. So I'm just giving you the general like best practices. But there are plenty of people I can even think of right now who break those rules and make really great stuff. And so know the rules so you can learn them and use them and then break them whenever you see fit. But in general, having overall consistency is going to help bring the piece together. And then when you want to deviate from it, it'll make the deviation that much more interesting. Okay, second E, I'm liking where we are at. I'm gonna do the center and then move on to the T. So how long have we been going at this point? 45 minutes, and we have almost 4 letters to show for it. This is how you know something is a fine art, is because it takes a lot longer than the quicker way, but there's something really beautiful about the process. Honestly, for me, like, I just get to relax. Like, I've got Is that working? Let's see. I'm gonna check real quick. Okay, so hopefully our audio is working again. Sorry, you guys, you're probably getting some feedback here. All right, let's see. Hannah, you can let me know if you hear me again. So strange. I don't know what it is with this microphone. Seems like we're getting audio, right? Let's see. Okay, great. Thank you. Lifesaver. Okay. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe the mic or the software, it seems like it's having issues keeping up over prolonged periods of time. So maybe that's what our problem is. That's why you gotta have your people on your live stream. Make sure it looks and sounds right. All right. On our 5th letter, averaging probably like 8 to 10 minutes per letter, but you know, I also do find that you start to speed up as well. You start to get kind of into a rhythm, and you start get to moving a little bit faster. It's almost like learning a dance. Whenever you start doing, like, I don't really know dances, but like if you start doing, especially like a ballroom dance, like something to where there's different steps to it. After a while, it kind of becomes a little bit brainless. Like your feet kind of move on their own, and so that's the same with this too. As I'm kind of learning the letter forms and learning how they work together, and learning just kind of what they want to look like. And it's kind of a funny way of saying that, but I'll explain it in just a second. But anyway, so you're as you go a little bit longer, you start to get a little bit more in a groove because you are becoming more familiar with whatever letters you're working with. So something that I say, which other people may say I'm wrong, and you know, you're free to do so, but especially when it comes to lettering, like I think of lettering whenever I'm trying to do something, even like this piece, or really anything to where I'm exploring and trying something new, it's almost like I'm an archaeologist and I'm uncovering something. And what I mean by that is that, like, obviously letters are not alive, but there is, like, when I'm working with them, I'll try different things. Like I'll try, hey, maybe I'll bring this part out a little bit, or I'll bring this part in, or I'll make this bigger. And there's almost kind of this sense of like, I don't think that's it. Like you're really uncovering almost what the letter form wants to be. Does it want to be big and fat and chunky, or does it want to have a lot of delicate, thin lines? And sometimes whenever you're working with a piece, you're kind of just like uncovering like what, not like you're even making it, but like this thing already is. This sounds like so meta, but it's like you're really just trying to discover what these letters and what the piece really wants to be. Yeah, I sound a little kooky, but I really have experienced that. The more that I do this kind of stuff, the more I see that you're kind of leaning into the letters and embracing where it seems like, I don't know, this sounds all a little strange, but anyway. So if I sound crazy, great. If you're like, no, I totally get it, that makes sense. Also great. Okay. Yep. Someone's knocking on my door. Okay, sweet. That's great. Turn this off. Turn off our stencil. All right, sweet. This is looking good. It really, sometimes it's nice for me to look up at my computer screen where I can see it, because I'm working sort of at an angle, and so pulling back to see how it all looks. But I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, let's keep going. So this is kind of interesting. Something sort of crazy has been happening the last like week about on my Instagram account. If you don't follow me on Instagram, my handle is Addison Gabe, ADDISONGABE, but which that's my first name and my middle name. But I did this Instagram reel. It was really just on a whim of how to like do a certain effect in Illustrator, and I did like maybe some hashtags like graphic design tutorial, or I didn't do anything. I didn't like put many. I put like maybe 4, just like to tie it to things graphic design, because most of my friends are like, great, that's cool, but they're not designers, so I'm trying to like get it to people who would actually benefit from the content. And the post is just like exploding. I don't know why. I posted it like 2 weeks ago, and it was just, and when I post stuff, I'm not like checking my phone to be like, are people liking it? It's just like, put it out there and then it is what it is. But like this post, I thought it was done, like, because usually things will get a little engagement for a while and then that'll be it. But let's see where it's at right now. I mean, it's honestly crazy, and it is a cool effect. But I mean, I don't know. It seems somewhat simple to me. But yeah, so in the like, it's like 1,500 likes right now, which that's a lot for me. Maybe you're like, oh, chump, that's nothing. But yeah, so go check it out and tell me what you think. Tell me if you think that it's like overrated. Like, no, that's not really that cool. Like, you shouldn't be getting all this engagement. But it is cool because there's a lot of people from different countries. Like, I'll wake up in the morning and it's like a lot of people from India, I think, judging by their names. Yeah, it's just funny. It's funny that I posted it like almost 3 weeks ago, and it was just like same old, and then for no apparent reason, I guess just because the Instagram algorithm decided it wanted to, juke me out, started getting like a ton of people watching it and liking it, which is funny. But yeah, so you could go watch it and tell me it's the one about how to make a sunburst effect in Illustrator. And even if you don't know what I'm talking about, tell me if you like think, oh yeah, it's too hyped up, that's dumb. Or if you think it's like, oh no, that's pretty cool. Let me know what you think. And because I'm honestly trying to figure it out as well. I have no idea how that happened. It's crazy. It's really just one of those things where it's like, I just keep checking back to be like, when is this gonna stop? Like, I'm doing nothing at this point. I'm just sitting around, and all these random people are finding it and enjoying it, which is just kind of fun. And really, that's honestly my heart behind content creation, is like, I just want things to be helpful. I mean, I'm not trying to make a living on this. I do this as my job separately, but I just want people to enjoy it and for it to be helpful. And I feel there's been so many things I've learned in this field over the years that I've really just had to teach myself. And so sharing knowledge is really like one of the best things about the internet, is that we can really crowdsource information, and we can all improve and learn from each other. And that's something that I really enjoy. That's really why I do this channel. That, and I just felt like, I don't know if anyone can relate, but I love new ideas. I don't love old ideas as much. So I am prone to start stuff that never gets finished. And so like, I feel like when I was a kid, I was a little melodramatic, and I would say that like, when I die, my life is gonna be like a box full of half-finished products or projects, like things that I started and or hobbies that I picked up and pretty quickly put back down. But I felt like, I don't know, I was just feeling this sense like I need to do something that show like to where I stick with it for the sake of sticking with it. Like, so for me, the YouTube stuff, like, it's not about followers or monetization or anything. It's really just about, it's first and foremost about just doing something and sticking with it. And I think that's like probably a lesson for all of us to learn, especially if you're in my generation or younger. We live in a hyper ADD culture. I mean, think about it, like in most Instagram or TikTok, Instagram Reels or TikToks, it's like 30 seconds tops. And like that's like the length of our attention span. And I think that one of the great deceptions in our society, or just in the culture we live in, is thinking that like you can get like that you what am I trying to say? That you can get the full experience of something super quickly. Like we want more information, we want education, like we want all these things and we want it fast and we want it immediate. But I think that we've lost the reality that some things take time, and that the diligence actually can be more beneficial than just getting something quick. So we're bouncing all around today. I'm into like philosophy now, but yeah. So that's, I think, an important thing to think about is that oftentimes the world gives us all of our content in really, really quick bites, and sometimes I think we have tried a lot of things, but we're not really full. If we're gonna flow with that analogy, it's actually kind of deep. But all these are just simple musings of a guy working on his iPad at 4 o'clock on Friday. So I think realistically, I'll probably try to finish our first word here today, the sweeter word, and I'm going to do the flourishes as well before I'm done. That's the plan, at least. And my question for you, I don't know if anyone is listening or cares, but is like, do you prefer to just put me on in the background and let me do my thing? Like, would it be worthwhile for me to continue this piece on the live stream and do it for a week or 2 or 3 weeks until it's fully done? Or are you like, okay, you taught me what I need to know, move on to something else? Like, you tell me, I'm not sure, really kind of learning, like if it's beneficial to continue to watch, then that's great. But if you're like, give me the details, and then, well, if that's the case, you're probably not watching a live stream, because that's more like a normal video. So give me the good stuff and I'm gonna get out of here. Which really is, again, what I'm saying about how our society gives us things and we in short bites, and we don't really have a lot of it. It's a big attention span. I mean, even I'm the same way. Like podcasts, like I don't listen to podcasts. When people tell me they do, I just don't understand. But it's also because I'm not an auditory learner. I can't learn so well from listening, especially when I'm doing something visually at the same time. So like people are like, yeah, I was working and just listening to these podcasts, and like I would remember literally none of it. Because when my eyes are stimulated, when I'm looking at things or like focusing, that's really the only way that I'm going to retain information. So, but anyway, my point is that like sometimes sitting down, like for me, if I want to take that in, I've got to like carve out time to sit and just like listen and like watch a video or something, or get rid of distractions so I can focus. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point. I'm really just rambling out of my head. Got some good texture here. Okay, so the inside of this R, this is going to be important. And we're talking about contours here. So I want to really clean up this inside curve. It's super nice and smooth. I think that's a little bit better. It was looking a little flat, which I don't want. That's not really what I was trying to do. It was looking kind of flattened, sort of like this. And I don't want it to feel flattened. I want it to feel really smooth, really rounded. Okay, at this point, my next step is going to be the swooshes, so I might as well start with my R because I'm already here. It's going to get so hard, like trying to get my lines really smooth but also precise is like, gosh, it's next to impossible. I will say when you're coming back and drawing swooshes like this, like or flourishes or whatever you want to call it, this is when it really tests your skills of making smooth curves, because like I talked about other contours, the inside and the outside both have to be really smooth and really clean, and it is not easy at all. I think I've probably made a few mistakes and I can show you and you can learn something. So one thing I've found that distinguishes decent lettering from really, really great lettering is like having a really good eye for what I would call a natural curve. And so with that, hold on, let me finish this. Basically, one of the most important things is to train your eye to notice when curves don't work. And so, see right here. Okay, we got some. All right, I'm gonna change to my highlighter color. Let's see if we carried this angle throughout. You can see we sort of started to teeter just a little bit, like it's not lining up as cleanly, which that's really okay. I'm not too stressed about that. Okay, so looking at this, I don't know if you see it, but to me, right here, that should be more filled in. I'm gonna draw it again. Now you may not see this, but this is what I'm going to try to teach you, is that with this line, what's happening here is we've got our thick, and this should be very gradual, or really what should happen is we should probably keep our same thickness until we start to get over to the edge, because it's almost like you're thinking about motion, right? Like it goes in and then it calms down, like it fast and then slow. Like that's kind of what we're going for. And so what's happening here is it's like it's already slowing down before it gets to the end. This brush is not doing me many favors. But if these are all supposed to roughly be the same size, right? And then they start to get smaller. So if we're doing this, we're going to follow these lines and connect them. You can see that what I've done here as of right now is not working completely yet. It needs to be thicker down below. And again, this is one of those like train your eye kind of things. But for me, when I look at this, like this immediately will catch my eye right here, because either it's like too low on the bottom or it's too low on the top. Sorry, there you go, it's better for you to see. Yeah, it doesn't feel natural. And so I don't know if you're familiar, but they have like you ever seen the diagram that kind of looks like this? It's the golden ratio. It exists in nature. So like there are certain shells and things, and I'm gonna botch this. Too bad. But basically, there's this curve that exists in nature, and it's perfectly smooth, and yet it also decreases in size. And so again, remember what I've talked about before, is that our brains are trying to make sense of things like letter forms in context with what we know. And so, for example, with serif letter forms, I talked about how Latin letter forms, like in the old Greek or Roman or whatever, like temples or things, you would have like your I, and then you have your V for like your Roman numerals or whatever. And the thick and thins that they use are still the same that we're using today. Like ultimately they follow a similar pattern. And so what I'm saying is that our eyes are looking to make sense of what we see based on what we know. And so whenever we see a curve that doesn't make sense, like it's not right, it doesn't follow this like pattern that's set for us even in nature, then it tells our brain, even if you can't put your finger on it, like, there's something I don't really like about this, or there's something that doesn't work here. And that's really that skill, if you'd like to learn more about lettering, that you really need to hone, is looking at these curves, or looking at really any curves in letter forms, or just in art, out in the world, in nature, and you're wanting to try to make them make the most sense. Like they need to feel believable. They need to feel real. And I think this probably sounds maybe a little crazy to some people. Like, wow, you think that much about curves. But yes, I really do. And so that immediately looks better to me. I brought it in on the bottom and I brought it more on the top. The same thing as what I'm talking about is with our contours, is that it's very important that the curve on the outside and on the inside are both really precise. I'm not gonna do that. Okay. You make this guy a little bit thicker to match the rest of the letter forms. Because I gotta be careful not to screw with the curves that I already tweaked here. That's why sometimes I add a little on the inside and then I add a little on the outside, because I'm trying to keep those curves looking nice and smooth and consistent. And that's what I mean, like making them look right. That's what I mean when I say right. That honestly may be a little bit too thick. Yeah, it is. We're gonna undo that. Let's see what we have. All right. You also notice this is a really important thing, is like I'm not drawing this curve like this. Like for the best control, you always want to be pulling down. And so that's why I'm angling my canvas where this is essentially a vertical line, or it's at least starting vertical. And that's how I'm gonna get the most precision, by pulling down as opposed to like pushing out to the side. You have much more control with your hands. Like here I'm pushing, I'm only gonna be doing it for a short bit. And honestly, it's probably better is if I pull. This is going down. Yep, see, I would not have been able to get a curve as smooth as that by pushing. And maybe you can. I mean, if you can, power to you. But it's really about training your hand, and in general, your downstrokes are going to be more controlled. And the reason for that is when you're doing an upstroke, for example, like a W, you're pushing against, like you're pushing up. And there's more resistance there. Whereas when you're going down, you're kind of dragging along the surface, which is less resistance, which helps you create something that's smoother. That's really important whenever you're working with like actual pen and paper or using paints and things. And with these swooshes, these flourishes, we are getting really expressive here. So we're having thick parts that are much thicker than any of our letters, and that's kind of the look that I'm going for. So at this point I'm kind of breaking that rule of keeping things consistent for the flourishes, because that's kind of how I've got them set up to be. And I may have to reel them in some places, like if they do feel too thick, then that's fine. We can pull it back. Start with where we're at and then go from there. But I do want to follow my stencil as best as I can. Like I'm going to erase this whole line because I was pushing, not pulling. Wow, that's like, that's really, really important lesson. Is to, in general, to pull your lines, don't push them. Hard thing too is generally, like if you move a little bit faster, you're going to get smoother lines, but you sort of have less control. So you got to try to figure out the right speed. Like if you go too slow, it's not going to look right, but if you go too fast, you're going to lose control. So we each have to learn our own, kind of learn how our hand, I guess just learn our motor controls and fine tune them, muscle memory or whatever you call it, to make sure that we can find the right balance of speed or I guess going fast and going slow, like speed and control is what This part's going to be tricky because I have to follow this other line as best I can. See, it's not perfect, no doubt. There's no convincing anyone that's perfect, but that's what I was talking about with hand lettering. That's what's interesting. And again, I will come back and refine some of this because my perfectionism will tolerate a little imperfection, but not too much. Maybe crazy. Like for example, this altogether just feels a bit lumpy. It doesn't feel smooth and clean and delicate. And so that's why I'm going to come back with my eraser. Just gently take in certain spots to try to remove any lumps. And usually work little by little, making small reductions. I don't know if you can tell, but it's like our line starts to come out this way, and then I had to reel it back in. It needs to feel like it's one consistent movement, but like right along here, it's like I start to go out, and then I try to course correct. That's not what we want. We want it to feel consistent. I'll have to redo that. Like I said, people, anytime we're pushing out our lines, they're not going to be as clean as we want. Gotta try pulling. So I'm just going to fill this in, even though it's going to be wonky and lumpy and too thick, and then I can come back like what I've talked about and work reductively. The reason I'm doing that is because my interior line, this inside, this line looks pretty solid, and so I don't want to erase it because I have what I want, and so now I can keep the inside basically as it is and just work on refining that outside of the line. So I feel like we're going at a pretty good pace at this point. See, I erased too much. I was pushing. So yeah, this is for sure way too thick. We're gonna come in and refine it. Nice and delicate, and I add and I remove, add and remove. It's called working reductively and then additively. I bet you additively is not the right way to say that. Making up words. Sort of speaking of that, maybe my last ramble before we finish this today. I just thought of this when I'm talking about art and art and design and different things. Watched a very interesting documentary last week on Netflix called Made You Look. Highly recommend. I wouldn't say I'm like a documentary buff by any means. It's not really my genre. But I was in the mood, and my wife and I watched this movie, and wow, it was very, very interesting. Essentially, I'll give you the back of the book blurb kind of thing. But essentially, there was this famous gallery, art gallery in New York called the Knoedler Gallery, and the short of it is that over roughly 20 years, an art dealer was selling fakes to the museum, or not to the museum, to the gallery, who was then selling those fakes to very wealthy people who were purchasing them for very large amounts of money. And then only later it kind of came out, like over the course of 20 years, I think they sold 60 of these fakes for $80 million. So like a ton of money. But anyway, so it's like the person who was like turning in these artworks to the gallery, she was definitely, you know, complicit, and they talk about her and her, like, you know, scheme and whatever. But there's also the story really centers on this woman who ran the gallery and was kind of the in-between who would sell these pieces to prospective buyers. And kind of the question it poses is like, how much did she know? Like, did she know that all these paintings that she was selling for absurd amounts of money were all totally fake? Was she intentionally scamming people? Did she have a hunch, you know, that maybe she was being played by this art dealer, but she just didn't want to tell anybody because things were going so well for her and for the museum, or for the, keep saying museum, for the gallery. Like, it's very, very interesting. And it's just one of those movies that kind of leaves you like wondering, like, who's really telling the truth here? You know, like what is real and what's not. Like, it's very interesting. So highly recommend, give it a watch. It'll give you something interesting to talk about and think about over your weekend. Okay. I think we'll probably call it quits after this one. I'm just getting a little tired. We've made some great progress today, for sure. That movie, the documentary, is called Made You Look. You should definitely watch it. Okay. Wow. Over an hour's worth of work, but I'm really proud of what we've got. Yeah, let me turn off the extra stencil so we can really just take it in. Cool. I mean, part of me is like a little bit stressed by how thick our flourishes get coming off of our R, but I think that that's one of the things to where we'll have to just kind of, once the whole piece comes together, we'll have to make a decision and say like, hey, is it too thick? Should we reel it in? Or when it's all said and done, does it complement everything else that's left here? So yeah, it's pretty, I'm pretty excited about that. All right, so that has been today's Learn Lettering Live. Hope that you enjoyed it. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back next week. I mean, hey, drop a comment, let me know, is it worth continuing this with you guys? I'm gonna assume yes. If you're like, God, no, do something else, teach me something else, then I could adjust as well. But let me know if you think this is something that you'd enjoy. And like always, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you had fun. I had fun, and I really enjoyed myself. And so if no one else did, I'm happy that I did. But I hope that you learned something today. And like I said, you can follow this channel for more content, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, After Effects, and other graphic design tutorials, all for free and posted every week. But I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the flip.